You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Are you ready to dairy-free your mind? This summer, melt away your dairy-free expectations with So Delicious dairy-free frozen desserts. Enjoy mind-blowing flavors like salted caramel cluster, chocolate cookies and cream, cookie dough, and more. For over 35 years, So Delicious has been cranking up the flavor with show-stopping products that are 100% dairy-free, certified vegan by Vegan Action, and are so unbelievably creamy, your taste buds will do a double take. Dairy-free your mind. Visit SoDeliciousDairyFree.com.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle, and I'm so glad that you are here. We are talking to one of my favorite guests, really in the history of the 13 years of this show. We've had a lot of great guests. Ron Paul, Noam Chomsky. But Agustina Vergara Cid is one of my favorites. She is a brand new citizen. She was about to get her citizenship the last time she was on the show. She has now become a citizen, and she shares a little bit about what it was like. What was the response in this day and age of Donald Trump and ICE and anti-immigrant feeling? What was it like to become an American citizen in the middle of all that? And how did Americans treat her after they find out that she's a citizen? I think you kind of find it to be surprising. And then she beautifully articulates why she wanted to become an American. And it is refreshingly positive. As I told her off air, I'm like, I spend a lot of time online and I just love talking to you because it makes me feel good about being here as opposed to like it being an imposition. So stay tuned. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. We appreciate you being here and thanks so much for joining us. Augustina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again, Chris. I always have a really great time talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. I really love your perspective. And it's not just that you are a researcher on immigration. I don't know, what would you call yourself in terms of like a professional capacity?
Yeah, I research immigration and especially think about it a lot kind of like from a philosophical perspective. So I'm not sure there's actually a standard job description that encompasses that, but that's what I do. I guess researcher would do it.
Yeah. So, but your heart is also in this and not just your head because you just became an American citizen. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I read your article and I'm not the first person to say that. And that's kind of what we're going to start talking about today because, first, why don't you just set the table? Like, what was the day like that you became a citizen? How long ago was it? And then what did you experience afterwards?
Well, I hope you have about 2 hours for me to talk about.
I do.
No, I'll try to keep it short, but it was along with my wedding, the best day of my life, and it was incredible. So this happened last July 3rd, actually. I became a citizen. So July 4th was my first full day as an American citizen, which was really, really cool. So essentially, this is something that I have dreamed of since I was literally 4 years old. We can go into that story at some point if you want. But my formal immigration journey started 8 years ago. And then finally it culminated on July 3rd. And it's really hard to put into words what it meant to me and how it felt to become formally an American. It's something that the way I think about it is it's something that I wish every native-born American could get to experience in a way or something similar to that, because it truly is special to actively, choose this country and choose to become part of the history and the fabric of this country. So essentially, the process is, I submitted an application back in November, and they do a lot of all the background checks and make sure that I am eligible, and all of that. And then finally, I had an interview with an adjudicator who approved my application, and then a few weeks later, I had my oath ceremony. And that's what happened on July 3rd. And essentially what happens there is it's a very brief ceremony, but very emotional. Essentially, you go in and you surrender your green card, which you always must have in order to be able to apply for citizenship. And then you're there for with maybe 10 to 15 people. It really depends on what group you are put with. And then I had the chance to have guests. I had my husband, I had my mother-in-law, and I had my best friend with me, and my own mom via FaceTime. And essentially, I took the oath of allegiance. I promised to defend this country, and I renounced any previous allegiance to any other country. And it was very emotional for me, especially close to the beginning of the oath. There's a part that says that that I vow to defend the Constitution of the United States, the laws and the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that part, like really early on, already got me. And I started sobbing as I was reciting the oath. And my mother-in-law recorded the oath on her phone. So I actually have a video of it, which is incredible.
All right, send it to me. We'll splice it in.
And it meant so much to me. I love this country so deeply. My entire life, essentially, since I was 4 years old, I've been wanting to be an American. Way before I even visited America, I sensed that there was something very, very special about this country. I wanted to be a part of it. Then when I visited, that cemented that feeling. And then when I grew up, I started studying American history and American political philosophy and the values that enabled the freedoms that Americans enjoy to this day. And I said, this is a political philosophy that I want to support, and this is definitely the country I want to live in, and that I want to help shape the future of this country. Now I'm able to vote. I can run for office, which I have no intention of doing. I cannot be president though, but I have no intention of being a politician at all. But I like to have this more active role in this incredible country.
Okay, so this is one of the reasons I love talking to you, because you chose to be here. You chose to take an oath, right? And as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, man, I always say America's an idea, but I hear it from you in such a visceral, real way that isn't really true for me in some respects. And I see on Facebook and social media all day long, I talk to people who feel like this country's been forced on them. Right. So I want to tease that out. Right. So let's go back to when you're a little girl. What is the idea of America? Articulate that for us. That 4-year-old Agustina's and when did you come to America? And translate that for us. Explain that to those of us who may have lost that America is an idea and we're just as awful as everybody else and it's just as bad and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so I totally reject that view. And I think, here's where they kind of the immigrant perspective really may help some Americans that have that view understand where we're coming from, the people that, give everything up to pursue this bigger value, which is living here in freedom. So essentially, when I was 4 years old, it was, I think some Americans may not be aware that America is such an influence in all Western countries. I grew up in Argentina, and America was a big influence. Music, TV shows, video games. I grew up playing video games that. Everything is movies, obviously Disney. All of that kind of transmits certain American values. My own kind of when America first became into kind of my awareness as something different and special was actually with a cartoon. I don't know if you know Babar the elephant.
Yeah, I do.
So,
yeah, I grew up watching it too on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, Babar the elephant has a special or something. It's called Babar Comes to America. And then Babar goes all over America, the Midwest, New York, DC, and then ends up in California to go to Hollywood to be part of a movie. And, as Babar, I remember this kind of distinctly, as Babar was traveling across America, I was like, oh my God, that place, this is a cartoon, right? Like, it's not actual footage of America, but I thought, wow, that is so cool. Like, what is this place? And my mom tells me that I told her, after watching that special, I told my mom that I would go to Hollywood and to live with Babar. I wanted to go to Hollywood, but specifically Hollywood, because Babar lived in France, I think it was.
Yeah.
I had no interest in living in France. What attracted me is what Babar showed me about America. And then, through movies, music, I always listened to a lot of American music. I always watched American cartoons, from Tom and Jerry to the Rugrats, like that sort of thing, and Disney movies. And I sensed, okay, there's this culture that is, I didn't put it this way in my head at that point, but there is, like, what is this culture that can create this sort of thing? Why don't I have the same thing? Why isn't there, like, made in Argentina Disney type thing? Why is Disney World so far away in America and we don't have one here? And then actually when I went to Disney World when I was 8 years old, just, from the moment I set foot in the Miami airport, I felt, okay, this is different. This is different from where I came from. And it's not like Argentina was, the jungle or anything. It was like underdeveloped. No,
Yeah, there's
Argentina,
a lot of people right now who, especially in our audience, who would love to move to Argentina because of Malay.
yeah, yeah, I know. We can talk about that too, but
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. But
yeah, but yeah, I sensed one thing I noticed, people conduct themselves differently. And then I saw the abundance everywhere in the supermarket, and everywhere. And this was even before I set foot in Disney World, which completely blew my mind. But there was something different about it. And I said, oh, how cool would it be to be able to come here more often? Or maybe, oh, it would be cool maybe someday living here. And then, as a teenager, I actually began reading philosophy, and I read a lot of American philosophers, and I began reading American history. And particularly when I read Ayn Rand was when I finally really began understanding what makes America so unique. And part of it is, how this country originated, the founding values of America that to this day, 250 almost years later, have a huge impact on how we live our lives.
so I just was lost in your story, so I've completely lost what I
Yeah,
was
sorry, I
about.
forgot it.
No,
I'm sorry. I
no,
could
no,
tell
no.
you, I could talk about this forever, and
I
just
know I could listen to you forever. I guess I think traveling really helps people. And a lot of times, like when we travel, Americans travel because of our position of wealth. I'm not that far off from paycheck to paycheck, but I'm a wealthy person by the world standards. And so we went on our honeymoon to Dominican Republic. And then a few months later, we went to Puerto Rico, which is an American territory, which was interesting. The difference between like Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico seemed like I was in Greenwood or Carmel, and with the shopping strip centers, and just with like a Caribbean Hispanic flavor to it. But when I went to Dominican Republic, we went to Punta Cana, which is the beach area, and that's sort of the same thing. You're like on a resort, and there's a grocery store, and there's a bunch of stuff, right? But then we took a bus tour to the capital, and for 2 hours rode through that. And I remember as a kid going to Mexico, and we went to Cancun, and glitz, glamour, right? But then we went to Chichen Itza. So again, a 2-hour bus ride through the countryside. And that was the first time I ever in my life saw poverty, right? Like the American conception of poverty is very difficult and very tough. And I'm not marginalizing or minimizing, but like what I have seen traveling in the conditions that people in those two countries specifically were living in, I mean, it's just unimaginable to me. So it kind of gave me an appreciation for what you're talking about and what we have here. I don't know how many people get those opportunities. And I don't get the sense that like you're in a three-sided dirt like in Argentina or anything. Like, but how can you explain, I guess, to an American like me who grew up in a comfortable house in the suburbs, who had a wealthy upbringing, like the air that we breathe is capitalism, right? The air that we breathe is the American government. The air that we breathe is the choice you're talking about. Like, give me perspective of what life was like in Argentina and how it's different now that you live in America, and that drive. Like, I think it's more than choice, right? So I really want to drill down into that and help give people a perspective for that motivation to leave their country, to come to a different place that, is different.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I can touch on. One of them is, there's always, when people immigrate and move to a different country, there's pull factors and there's push factors. The pull factors are what draws someone to a specific place like America. And the push factors are the things that people are sort of escaping or rejecting from their home countries, and they leave that home country and then they end up somewhere else. For me, it was much more of a pull factor to America than it was Argentina was pushing me out, because I liked American culture better. Like in Argentina, when I left in 2017, was a disaster, like really bad. And then it got even worse, and then it got better now, recently, the last couple of years. But essentially, the reason I left, so when I started being fascinated by America, Argentina wasn't this big disaster. The big disaster really became really deep in 2001. I was still a kid, but that's basically when things took a really dramatic turn for the worst. And then we had basically 20 years of a left-leaning socialistic government. What this government is essentially curtail all economic opportunity, and everything was an obstacle. Like, you wanted to open a business, there were so many obstacles. You wanted to run your company how you see fit, there was always an obstacle. Obviously, I was a child, so it's not like, oh, I wanted to run my business and the government isn't letting me. But it's, I could see it with my parents in my parents' work. Then all these regulations ended up triggering dramatic inflation, which made it really hard to survive. And, that also just kills the spirit of people. That makes it so everything, like life, becomes kind of like a burden. You can't be free to pursue the things that you want. You always are tied to whatever edict the government wants to issue that is going to curtail your freedoms. And of course, when the economy goes to hell, also it becomes really unsafe. So for me, as a young woman, as a teenager, and in my early 20s, it was every time going out on the streets, it was a risk, because it was really unsafe, always looking over my shoulder. And, because the welfare state was so big, and, there was a relatively small number of people paying for all these benefits for other people who, since Perón in the 50s and 40s, had been used to essentially not working and living off of welfare from the state. The part of what the welfare state does, it turns everyone, into a threat, because, well, other humans have a right over the products of my labor. So if I have to give it up, then other humans, become a threat to me and my pursuit of values that I want to pursue using the products of my labor. That's part of what the welfare state does. And of course, we have a welfare state in America as well, but it's much, much smaller and with a different structure than it is in Argentina. I don't support either, but it's radically different. So those are some of the things that really influence someone's quality of life. And again, I was upper middle class in Argentina. I could have stayed and have an okay life. I could have lived in a gated community, and I was, on track to having a really comfortable job in the judiciary. I would have probably eventually become a judge even. But that was good enough, so to speak. But I didn't want good enough. I wanted the absolute best that I could possibly make with my life. And I understood that America was the place to do it, because even though we have a mixed economy, it is largely a free country. And that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that scale and scope, I think, is really interesting because I'm listening to you and I'm like, did she read the news before she signed up? Because it sounds a little bit I really, and I'm sure a lot of our audience is listening thinking, COVID is harassing, that era is harassing businesses. There's a lot of encroachment from the government in various areas. But I guess what you're saying is like the degrees of difference are almost still unimaginable, even though we've had a lot of what you're talking about, like the welfare state. I wasn't aware of that because it seems so big and so massive and it's inflating our economy so much because we're printing money to keep it going. But that compared to Argentina is still really small, right? So is it just the degrees, the difference that make you go, I want to be an American, even though there's still some of these similar challenges, like it's just night and day?
No, I mean, the part of why those things happen in Argentina and they don't happen in as much or to the same degree or extent as they happen in America is because fundamentally, philosophically, they're different countries. And I mean, Argentina was founded inspired by the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution, but no one really worked hard enough to maintain that over time. I think of America that is different in America. The fact that America when America was founded was such a novel invention. There was literally not a country on earth that was founded on the principle essentially of individual rights, of freedom, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, subjugating before the individual was subjugated to the whims of society and the government and the collective. The founding fathers said no more. The individual is sacred, and it is not going to be subjugated to society. We're going to respect his or her right to the pursuit of happiness and their life and liberty and property. That may seem really abstract, but those founding principles that then the Constitution protected, really, to this day, even though we're seeing, I particularly am very sad and disappointed with what's going on right now in our country. I think that even then, I think that we are still a country of freedom, and I think that we can fight back against those policies and the politicians that are pushing what I consider to be un-American or even anti-American values. Because all the things that we're seeing that are wrong, that are evil, and that historically have been wrong and evil are actually a betrayal of our founding values, not a consequence of them. They are the result of the betrayal of those values. So I think, that's part of the difference. We were founded on this completely different and new and novel set of ideas that enshrine individual freedom, and most other countries didn't. And if they did, they were kind of like copying America, but they didn't really do a good job at, protecting that freedom. And I think we need more to do here in America, but largely, I think we have been able to protect those values.
Yeah, I think when you have been so steeped in the mythology of America or the reality of America or the ideas of America, it's not going to disappear overnight. I always say Vladimir Putin broke down over 20 years what it took Russia to build in 8, right? It took 8 years to build democratic institutions, and it took Putin 20 years to tear those down. Like, we're almost on year 250. I have been a little alarmed at the speed of the breakdown or the excuses that are made for the erosion of these institutions. I'm not going to get them off of my soapbox, but I do agree with you. Like, someone asked me, like, is it all over the other day? And I said, I'm now at the point where I put everything on the table. I'm willing to let my imagination go wild and accept that anything could be, but I just have a hard time thinking that Americans are going to look at socialism or fascism in any form and go, yes, please, when we grew up with these founding values and being taught these values. And it's just not Washington's cherry tree, but it's like these ideas of individualism, of capitalism, of democracy, they're so ingrained in us from the time, like we have a first grader and she's learning all about these ideas, right? And every year for the rest of your life, you will have that. I don't want to say indoctrination, but common story, I guess. And I just think it's going to be hard for Americans to accept the different, especially when the different from what we've had is a lot worse. Be it the left or the right taking us to bigger government. I'd love your opinion and your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it's
I guess
I've
the
been
question is, will the
yeah.
center hold? Is the maybe the way I doubt myself a little bit. The center will hold. I'm doubting that a little bit now, and I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I usually don't think about it as, left, right, or center. To me, kind of like the political spectrum is more individualism and collectivism, more than, because you can have people on the left who are collectivists and people on the right who are collectivists. You have Bernie Sanders and you have Donald Trump, who are collectivists to me. I think one thing that worries me is I think after COVID and how many Americans kind of like accepted that we were going to be locked down and that we couldn't go and go about our lives, and I think that is a bad precedent because it was authoritarianism, I think, and so that I find a little scary. Then I find scary that there wasn't enough condemnation of January 6th, for example. I am very disappointed at that. And you said that your daughter is learning about these American values, and I love that, and I love to hear that. But I do know that many other students are learning un-American values, or are learning about American values in a way that is not really accurate, and that treat America as like America was founded as an oppressive country and blah blah blah, which is literally, factually, and philosophically untrue. So I think what needs to be done, and I remain having hope about this, is that the intellectuals and let's call them like influencers and the people putting forward ideas are going to do the work that is needed. You know how I forget exactly. I'm blanking out right now on his name, but that saying that says the price of freedom if it's eternal vigilance. And I think that is actually true. And it is the role of the citizens and of the intellectuals and the communicators to defend these ideas and to stand up for these values. So we can put an end to this, what I consider to be this very, very collectivistic and strong trend that we're seeing in politics and education and whatnot.
Yeah. Let's talk about Millet, and then we'll wrap up kind of with from a libertarian perspective. It seems like things are going the right direction, and you're starting to see numbers like I see on social media, like all these different indicators are moving in the right direction. But I do understand, like, from the limited perspective, very limited compared to what your feed probably is, like, it's controversial. It's like, look at the reaction to Doge here in America, where you're cutting 0.6% of the workforce, and most of those people have been hired back, and everyone loses their mind. There, it seems like real cuts are taking place. Significant departments are being shut down. There's rioting in the streets. There's a tough stance on those rioters. So it's been extreme, maybe in execution, but you're starting to see results. That's what I've seen. I'd love to be told where I'm right or wrong in some of that, and then hear your perspective on Millet in Argentina.
Yeah, so it's what Millet is doing. It is definitely extreme in comparison to what if you take into account what the Argentinian state was. I don't think the American mind can comprehend the size and scope of the Argentinian government. It was absolutely obscene. And the way that the corruption, the misallocation of funds, it was something that is, unimaginable for any rational person. Milei came and got rid of that, right? And it's like, but it's got back to, it's trying to get back to a normal baseline, a country maybe more similar to United States in terms of the scope. Um, but it does seem extreme to the locals, let's say, because they have been, all their lives, government was huge, and the government was there to tell them how much to dictate how much they should pay for the groceries, and to protect their rent, right? And to tell them, oh, you shouldn't be paying more than this, and I'm going to make sure that your evil landlord does not raise your rent. So they were used to the government protecting them, so to speak, and dictating their lives essentially. And they thought that without the government, they would be lost because these evil, quote, corporations, which is just business people and companies and stores and landlords, were going to go after them. Milei came and said, no more. Get rid of price controls, get rid of rent controls. And he actually is showing people that freedom works. What happened when rent control went away? Well, how would you know? Like, there's more, like, rent went down because there's more availability now. There's more housing available because the previous rent control was absolutely ridiculous, like any rent control is. Have prices gone up dramatically, like in a way that they're completely unaffordable? No, and there are no price controls. Yes, prices have gone up, and it's part of the way that the economy has to stabilize after decades of absolute chaos and government central planning and government controls. And I think in terms of what Milei is doing in terms of the scope of the government, look, he's an anarcho-capitalism at heart. I don't share that view at all. I think government is not, we need government, and I don't even think that government is a necessary evil. I think government is a necessary good when it's when the scope is what it should be, which is the protection of individual rights. But what Milei is doing is it's cutting government functions and ministries and whatnot that are completely out of that scope of what a government should do. But he's doing it in a way that is actually pretty smart and pretty thought through. You know how he has this chainsaw that he swings around? That is a prop, obviously, because like his actual approach is more like, a scalpel, right? He's operating in a very delimited way and extracting and getting rid of things that are at this moment in time, we are ready, so to speak, to get rid of. I think what Doge was just cut everything without much thought to it, and let's see where the chips fall and,
They literally,
whatever.
So I was talking to someone here locally, and they were worried about something, and they were like, they consulted an attorney, and the attorney basically said, just don't put these terms into your documents, website, anything, because all they're doing at Doge is just going through and doing a keyword search and then canceling based on the keyword. Like, to me, that's just that's like the worst way to do it. Yeah. Whereas what you're talking about, that's really interesting, that like society, the economy, industries are ready to like take this over, and let's cut this and move this private because it's been thought out is so much better.
Yeah, and he really, really put a lot of thought, and he continues to put a lot of thought to figure out what he should cut, who he should fire, and he tries to help people who he fires from government positions to transition them to a different, more, rational function of government. And I believe he has some programs to help those people go to the private sector as well. So yeah, that's a big difference and from what's happened. And I think what we've seen with Doge again is Ayn Rand actually said once that they asked her, if you were president tomorrow, what would you do? Would you deregulate everything? And she said, first of all, I would not want to be president. And second of all, she said, if you deregulate overnight, if you were to literally get rid of regulations and cut government programs and whatever, that would actually be authoritarian, because that's not how a free economy would work. Nothing happens overnight in a free economy. And when you have an economy that is used to this government intervention, you have to phase it out. You can't just overnight, cut USAID. This is my opinion. I don't agree with foreign aid in the way that in any way really, but especially in the way that it was being enacted in many cases. But I don't think it was right to just cut it overnight without warning and without any sort of plan to, phase it out. So I think that is actually kind of authoritarian. And I think that is kind of like the approach that Doge has. It has no rhyme or reason, whereas Milei was really, really thoughtful in doing it.
Yeah, cultural institutions, for instance, essentially you go back 30, 40 years and the government says we're going to get involved in all of these different things to aid all of these different things like research, cultural things like history, art, whatever. And you dangle the money so everybody starts to take the money. And so all of the private industry and the private wealth starts to put their money in other places. Like Bill Gates takes his money and puts it in vaccines in Africa. Right. And so then you pull the rug out from everybody and cause a ton of layoffs in a bunch of different industries because now you've just turned the spigot off. You've actually made the economy worse as opposed to saying, this is what we're doing in 6 months. Now, I also wonder, like, would they have the nerve to do it in 6 months? Maybe just pull the rug and people react. But I really like what Ayn Rand said there, like, give people time to plan so they can figure it out, because these institutions that are built are not, funding doesn't come overnight. Like, it's just not like, it's a very immature conception of how capital works and flows.
Yeah, exactly. And like in a free economy, nothing happens like that, barring an alien invasion that you didn't see coming, and suddenly we're at war with the aliens or something. Like nothing happens overnight like that. There's planning, there's long range thinking, and people have the capacity to adjust and plan, and which, if you just overnight just change the rules of the game and make everything disappear, then what are people supposed to do?
Okay, so let's go back to your citizenship, because I want to maybe talk a little bit about the article, because I loved hearing about the reaction to you becoming a citizen and the contextualization of now, where I think if you spent all day online, you just think that everybody hates immigrants and you're not really welcome here. And what are you thinking? You're crazy. What has the response been to you becoming an American citizen by Americans?
Yeah, so that response was honestly I got the chance to speak to literally hundreds of Americans the days after the day that I became naturalized and then after, and I'll say in a moment why. But it's one of the most beautiful things that ever happened to me, like experiencing that reaction, because I've always been treated very well, very fairly by Americans ever since I moved here 8 years ago. I've honestly never been discriminated against. I've never been insulted because of my country of origin or the color of my skin or my accent or anything like that. Of course, there are trolls on the internet and on bots or whatever. Those don't count. Those are whatever they are. But when I became an American, so essentially that day after I took my oath ceremony, I took my oath at 8:46 a.m. And then after that, I went for brunch, and then I had to fly to Boston because I had to give a talk a couple days later at a conference. At the airport, I was so excited and so happy that, and like, I like to talk to a lot of people when I travel, and I love to get to know kind of like strangers, see what they're doing and what they think of things. And I was talking, for instance, with someone working, like she's at an airport shop, and she sold me a water, and she heard my accent. She's like, "Oh, where is that accent from?" And I said, "Yeah, from Argentina, but actually, starting today, I am an American." She said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, I became a citizen today." "Oh my God!" And she hugged me, and we became basically friends out of that. And then I also talked to the pilots during my flight. One of the pilots approached me, and we struck a, he was walking by, and I started a conversation with him, and I told him, "Oh, I became an American today." And he was so happy, and he told me all about his Ukrainian girlfriend, who also was an immigrant, and that he knows how hard it is to immigrate to America legally and how special it was for her to become an American. Then at the end of the flight, he says, we have a passenger today who just became an American just in time for the 4th of July. Let's give her a round of applause. And the plane started clapping, which seems like so from like a really cheesy Hollywood movie, but it was like it was such a special
Welcome
moment.
to America. You're living the life of Pawnee, Indiana.
Pretty much.
What was that show? I forget the name of it, with Amy
Parks and
Poehler.
Recreation.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And then when I got the chance to go give my talk on July 5, 48 hours after my ceremony, I got to share during my talk because my talk was on immigration. I incorporated my my citizenship to it. And I got a standing ovation, and I got a bunch of people approaching me after, literally hundreds of people approaching me after, congratulating. Most of them didn't know me, but approaching me, congratulating me, many of them with tears in their eyes, to shake my hand and telling me like, welcome home. And that reaction, I never expected such a massive reaction. I had a veteran who approached me 3 times because 2 of those times he was so choked up when trying to shake my hand that he couldn't say anything to me. And I didn't know him, but he could see from what little he saw of me that I really love this country and I work hard to be here. And he saw how much it meant to me to become an American, and he was, incredibly welcoming of me. And I got that experience. Like to this day, literally, I get messages of congratulations because someone may see a tweet or whatever, and then they DM me or they post on my Twitter, "Oh my God, congratulations! As that is amazing. Welcome to America." And I got that reaction from people all over, from people who are conservative, from people who are more like left-leaning or progressive. And I think it was such a special thing, and it highlighted to me how Americans are largely still, even though, there's a Trump in power and whatever, and you see all this discourse on the news, Americans are largely still welcoming of immigrants. The problem is when they fall for this collectivistic rhetoric that politicians push, where it's like, oh, all immigrants are criminals and they are rapists and they eat the dogs and the cats. When they fall for that tribalism, that's when they turn against immigration kind of like collectively. But when they meet an immigrant, when they talk to someone and they're like, oh, you came here to work, you're peaceful, welcome home, join us. I think that is still overwhelmingly what most Americans feel. And I have been experiencing for 8 years. And I definitely kind of like the combination of that was the reaction to my citizenship.
Yeah, I think that's a huge reason I'm a libertarian, and I suspect maybe you and most other libertarians is like people individually are good people and try to do their best. But when we get in large groups, we seem to love evil. It's like that. It just taps into something that is deep within us that once we get into these tribal groups, collectivist groups, it turns into really dark places. And we just increasingly accept more evil as we stare at it. And I've wondered, and you kind of hit on in your article something that I've thought. It's like people, okay, we want the border rush to stop, like 100,000 people a day coming in. It's complete chaos at the border. We don't want people who are rapists, drug lords, like coming into the country. We want something to be done about that. And it seemed like nothing had been done for a decade about it. Even when Trump was in office, he built a part of a wall. But at the same time, like once you start taking kids from cancer beds, teachers at local schools, people who have, I have one friend who has maids and they're terrified.
Yeah.
I heard one story about a family where the parents won't leave the house, so the kids have to go out. Like, I don't know. Once the people that we are personally connected to start to suffer hardship, then that becomes real for people who aren't in the crosshairs, who aren't experiencing, I would put it in some ways, government oppression. I know others would go, well, they came here illegal and they committed a misdemeanor and crossed an imaginary line, and so that they get what's coming to them. And I'd love to ask you about that psychology in a minute, but the power of individualism really shone through in your article and how you've been treated and how people treat immigrants on an individual level, but collectively, we all kind of accept some really awful things.
Yeah, that's I have a colleague who says tribalism makes you stupid, but also I think tribalism makes you evil, and then makes you reject otherwise good people because they're member of this opposite tribe that you for some reason despise. So I think the reaction to individual immigrants is definitely still positive, and part of I think, and there's a couple of polls now that show that Americans, they used to be not supportive of immigration allegedly in polls or whatever during Biden. I think part of it is because they saw that the border was chaotic and they fell prey to Trump's rhetoric about the border. And then now apparently they're turning around. And I think part of there's apparently unprecedented support for more immigration.
Hmm.
I think part of it is that they're also actually seeing what a mass deportation agenda looks like. Because they thought we're going to go after the MS-13 members and all these other gang members and whatnot. And it turns out that, of course, there are probably many gang members and whatnot on American soil. But the truth is that they are a tiny, tiny minority. The vast majority of immigrants that are here illegally are peaceful and that they just came here to work. And that's why you're seeing the maids being deported, the children being deported, and the Trump administration has chosen to enact the current law in a way that is absolutely brutal and cruel, but it is the law. We have to admit that many of the things that Trump is doing is what Congress has mandated the executive to do. Many other things, in my opinion, are absolutely lawless. For instance, sending asylum seekers to El Salvador to rot in a maximum security prison and be tortured, as we now know that happened. But yeah, a mass deportation agenda entails essentially a police state where a lot of peaceful people are going to be snatched and imprisoned in horrible conditions and then be, potentially deported, or some of them are really hard. We don't know where they're hard to locate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Once they get snatched by the immigration police.
Yeah, 71%, according to ICE's own data, which they're congressionally mandated to put out, 71% of the people that they've detained don't have criminal records. Of the 46,000, I think this article says, 46,113. I'm not an open borders person. I think we're definitely in we have lack libertarian imagination these days, and everybody's accepting the question by the government, are you open borders or closed borders? Like, maybe there's a different way, like Bush's 2006 proposal where we expand work visas and allow people to come here and follow. Like, maybe there's a different way to do it. What would a smart immigration system look like that respects the liberty and dignity of all human beings? For you, is that all the way to open borders? Is that where not open borders? Like, what? Help us kind of think about immigration in a smarter, different way than the way that the two parties offer it to us.
Yeah, I don't like to use the term open borders because it's not something that is well defined, and it's also used to kind of like imply that literally anyone, should be able to walk through the border and just come to America, no matter what. And I do not agree with that at all. I think that the way I put it is I want freedom in immigration, with everything that the word freedom entails. So part of what that entails is there are people that should definitely be excluded from coming to America. And I put them broadly in three categories: national security threats. So we should not allow, a member of Hamas to immigrate to America, or any members of terrorist organizations. They should not be able to be here in any capacity. then those that have records of violent crimes, I think, should be excluded because they have proved that they are capable of committing gross violations of other people's rights. And I think that people who have certain infectious diseases of a certain degree of gravity should also be excluded until they recover. So if you have tuberculosis, go home until you get better, and then if you meet these very basic criteria, you may be able to come and enter the United States. I think essentially that approach, which is, legally would have some more complexities and whatnot, but I do think that the government has to have a really compelling reason to stop someone from moving and to stop an American from welcoming whoever they want to welcome, whoever they want to associate with, whoever they want to hire. So I think that what should dictate how many immigrants, because they say, okay, how many immigrants do you want in America? Whatever the market can accommodate. Like, it's not for me to decide how many immigrants should be allowed. If American employers want to hire immigrants, then however many they want to hire, and they are peaceful and they, meet all these other requirements, they should be able to be here. Now, I understand that sounds kind of utopian, right? And that, to me, that is the ideal in a free society. And of course, in a free society, we wouldn't have any welfare or anything like that, which welfare for immigrants now is also very, very limited despite other narratives. But I think that in the system that we have right now, there are avenues and ways to expand legal immigration, to begin inching closer to freedom, to be respectful of people's right to move, and also Americans' right to hire, to associate, to welcome into their homes the people that they desire to welcome into their homes. There's a scholar at Cato, his name is Alex Norasta, who says, every restriction on immigration is a restriction on native-born Americans. And if you think about it, when you're restricted, you are forbidden from hiring the talent, someone who's really, really talented and lives abroad because they are, for the sole reason that they are foreigner. Or when you have to ask permission from the government to live with your spouse in America because your spouse is a foreigner, that is a restriction on your rights as an American. So I think that we can discuss like concrete policies that could change to make that happen, but I think that it's definitely possible for it to happen in the system that we have right now, to bring us a little closer to what I think is the ideal.
So, last question. If you could just leave listeners with one message right now about, it could be immigration, it could be the future of America. I like ending on a high note with you because you just articulate so many things so well. But what's that one message that right now at August of 2025 that you think Americans really need to hear as a new American?
Yeah. So to my fellow Americans,
she's already running for office. I can hear it.
No, never. You can.
You're a good and decent person. You'd never run for office.
You can hold me accountable. If I ever run for office, somebody body snatch me. Like, this is I fight the fight, which I think, and this goes to the point that I would tell my fellow Americans, which is, the fight for America, the fight for our founding values, and to sustain, to go back to those values and even improve on them, is not political. Meaning, it's not, voting for this candidate for the Senate. I mean, that matters. But ultimately, it's kind of like a philosophical battle. It's an intellectual battle. And part of it is, understanding and appreciating, what makes this country unique, this individualism that I spoke about, and truly going out there and defending it, kind of like engaging in this philosophical battle. And you don't have to be a philosophy PhD to do it. I am not a philosophy PhD. I am not a philosopher. I just care about these things, and I do my best to advocate for things that are in accordance with our founding values, our Constitution. So if you are unhappy with how things are going in this country, if you see ICE masked agents, breaking car windows and getting people out and throwing them in unmarked vans, speak up. say, look, this is not the America that I like. I am not okay with this militarization of America. I think this is un-American. Speak up, post on social media, or write articles if you can do that. Write to your Congress people, make your Congress people more afraid of you in the sense of you will withdraw your vote than they are of, Washington, D.C., of Donald Trump or whoever. So I think, if we're going to preserve these American values, and whatever it is that you fall on the so-called the political spectrum, you have to speak up. It is our responsibility as Americans to continue this incredible experiment that is America. So we have to be active and we have to participate and we have to exercise all these rights that our Constitution grants us. Chief among them, of course, not grants us, recognizes, chief among them are freedom of speech. And I think people often understate the importance of speaking up and issuing moral judgment about our politics.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Where can people follow you and wish you good congratulations? Where would you like people to follow your work at?
So you can Google me and you will find Agustina Vergara Cid and you will find my socials. Otherwise, on Twitter, I'm Agustina V Cid, CID, and then same handle on Instagram. And I tend to share different content on both. And on both, I actually also share my articles and kind of podcast appearances and episodes like this one.
Awesome. Agustina, thank you so much for joining. We'll see you again.
Thank you so much, Chris.
And thank you for watching the show today. I hope you got something out of it. I certainly did. And if you did, please share it on social media, send it to a friend, and let them know, hey, this is worth listening to. That's how you can support any podcast you listen to and any creator that you love. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Chris Spangle Show. Okay.